Airlines are bracing for a tough year as higher jet fuel prices put a squeeze on profits.
Just as Americans pay more at the pump, they're now starting to pay more in the air. With jet fuel prices jumping 50% in just a year, now airlines are starting to raise ticket prices.
In the spring of 2008, as crude oil hurtled past $130 a barrel and airlines across the United States began slashing routes and issuing layoff notices by the thousands, one carrier was doing something almost nobody could explain. Southwest Airlines was expanding. While Continental Airlines and United eliminated jobs, citing fuel costs they simply could not afford, Southwest was adding capacity, holding fares steady, and posting profits in an industry hemorrhaging cash. The reason had nothing to do with better planes, smarter routes, or more efficient operations. It came down to a single number: $51. That was the price per barrel Southwest had locked in years earlier through an aggressive fuel hedging program, while every other major carrier was paying the market rate of $130 or more. In 2008 alone, this invisible financial position generated $1.3 billion in savings. Over the preceding decade, the strategy had saved an estimated $3.5 billion, accounting for 83% of Southwest's total profits between 1998 and 2008. For decades since, the airline industry has treated fuel hedging as a settled question. Some airlines hedge, some don't. It's a back-office decision passengers never hear about. If Southwest proved that hedging could save billions, why did American Airlines deliberately abandon hedging entirely and save $600 million by doing the exact opposite? Why did Delta Airlines lose $4 billion on hedges over 8 years, then buy an oil refinery? Every major airline on Earth has access to the same financial instruments, the same commodity markets, the same Wall Street advisors. Yet their fuel strategies couldn't be more different. So, how can the same decision, hedge or don't hedge, simultaneously represent the smartest and the most catastrophic move in aviation? To understand why fuel strategy matters more than almost any operational decision an airline makes, you need to understand one number. In 2025, the IATA projected the global airline industry would spend approximately $236 billion on jet fuel, roughly 25% of airline operating expenses. A single dollar increase in the price of a barrel of jet fuel adds approximately $2 billion to the industry's annual bill. No route optimization, no seat reconfiguration, no loyalty program redesign comes close to moving the needle like fuel price does. And yet, unlike aircraft orders or network planning, fuel strategy is almost entirely invisible to the outside world. The instruments are financial derivatives, call options that cap the price an airline pays, CA price range with both a ceiling and a floor, swap agreements that lock in a fixed price regardless of what the market does. Airlines rarely buy physical jet fuel for future delivery. Instead, they make financial bets that offset the cost of fuel purchased at market rates. The mechanics sound simple, the consequences are anything but. When oil prices rise above your hedge, you save millions or even billions. When oil prices fall below your hedge, you're contractually obliged to pay above market rates for fuel you've already committed to burn. This creates a landscape where every airline's fuel strategy reflects not just a financial calculation, but an entire philosophy about risk, market timing, and competitive positioning. Southwest's hedging program didn't start as genius, it started as paranoia. Following the Gulf War oil spikes of 1990, most airlines treated the price surge as a temporary anomaly. Southwest's leadership, guided by then CFO Gary Kelly and the philosophy of founder Herb Kelleher, viewed it as systemic risk. By 1994, while competitors invested in marketing campaigns and hub expansions, Southwest began quietly locking in 20 to 30% of its fuel needs months in advance. The strategy scaled. By 2000, Southwest was hedging the majority of its fuel needs for certain quarters. In Q3 of 2000 alone, hedging saved tens of millions of dollars when prices rose unexpectedly. Wall Street took notice. Then came the 2000s oil supercycle.
The $100, Hugh, is mainly psychological. We've seen oil in this high 90s for a long time. It pulled back a little bit, but we'll probably see it hit 100 again in the next 24 or 36 hours.
Oil prices top $105 a barrel, bringing the national conversation once again to where America gets and how it consumes its energy.
Prices climbed relentlessly. $40, $60, $80, $100. Southwest's hedges, placed years earlier at dramatically lower prices, became more valuable with every dollar of increase. The 2008 spike to $147 per barrel was the apex. Southwest's $51 hedges weren't just saving money, they were funding expansion while competitors contracted. But Southwest wasn't the only airline making fuel bets. Others were making them too. They were just losing. United Airlines hedged roughly half its fuel at prices above $100 per barrel in 2008. Confident prices would keep climbing. When the financial crisis hit and oil collapsed, United reported hedging losses of $544 million in a single quarter, including $72 million in realized losses and $472 million in unrealized losses. This was the cruel paradox of hedging. The same market crash that should have given airlines relief, cheaper fuel, instead punished hedged carriers who'd locked in prices at the peak. Then came 2014. Oil prices plummeted from over $100 to under $50 per barrel. Delta, which had been hedging aggressively for years, faced cumulative losses of $4 billion on its hedge positions over 8 years. In 2016 alone, Delta paid $450 million just to settle losing contracts early. Meanwhile, American Airlines was counting its money. After American Airlines merged with US Airways, the combined carrier adopted US Airways' philosophy: no hedging, period. Hedging at $70 per barrel costs roughly $10 per barrel in premiums. Oil would need to reach $80 just to break even on the insurance. Below that, you've paid for protection you didn't need. Above that, the savings only begin after overcoming the premium cost. American Airlines leadership argued that fuel prices and airline revenue naturally correlate. When the economy is strong, oil prices rise, but passengers are willing to pay higher fares. When recession hits, fuel prices drop, offsetting lower demand. The ticket price itself acts as a hedge. In 2014, this philosophy paid off spectacularly when Delta and United absorbed hundreds of millions in hedging losses as oil prices cratered. American Airlines captured approximately $600 million in savings by simply buying fuel at collapsing market rates. The contrast was stark. In 2009, unhedged carriers paid significantly less per gallon for fuel than their hedged competitors. The carriers without hedging positions had the lowest fuel costs in the industry. Emirates reached the same conclusion from the other side of the world, abandoning hedging in 2009, after significant losses and remaining unhedged since. The world's two most philosophically different airlines, a low-cost domestic carrier and a state-backed Gulf megacarrier, arrived at identical strategies. Then there was Delta's solution, which defied every category entirely. In 2012, Delta Airlines purchased the Trainer Oil Refinery in Pennsylvania for $150 million, roughly the list price of a single larger wide-body aircraft. The logic was unlike anything the industry had seen. Instead of hedging with financial instruments, Delta would hedge physically by actually refining its own jet fuel. The refinery has a capacity of approximately 185,000 barrels per day. When refining margins, the so-called crack spread between crude oil and refined jet fuel, spike upward. The refinery generates profit that directly offsets Delta's higher fuel costs. In 2022, this strategy delivered. Record crack spreads gave Delta a significant per-gallon advantage over competitors. The refinery generated substantial third-party revenue that year. But the refinery also carried risks invisible to financial hedging. Environmental compliance costs, particularly biofuel blending credits known as RINs, periodically wiped out quarterly profits. Running an industrial facility introduced operational complexity that no other Treasury department was designed to handle. Delta's approach was neither hedging nor not hedging. It was vertical integration, an unconventional strategy. If the 2014 crash exposed hedging's downside, the 2020 pandemic exposed something far worse: phantom fuel. Airlines had hedged fuel they expected to burn throughout 2020. When COVID-19 grounded fleets worldwide, the fuel was never purchased, but the financial contracts remained. Accounting rules required that these orphaned hedges be marked to market immediately as losses, since the underlying consumption had disappeared. The numbers were devastating. European carriers, including Lufthansa, IAG, and Ryanair, faced estimated billions of mark-to-market losses. In Asia-Pacific, Cathay Pacific, Singapore Airlines, and Qantas reported combined hedging losses in the billions. Ryanair, which had hedged approximately 90% of its fuel at higher rates, absorbed a €300 million hit when crude collapsed below $20 per barrel. The hedges were designed to protect against exactly the kind of economic disruption that COVID represented. Instead, they amplified the financial damage at the worst possible moment. Yet, hedging's reputation recovered faster than expected. When the Russia-Ukraine war spiked fuel prices in 2022, Southwest's hedging program saved $1.2 billion. The carriers that had maintained their position looked prescient again. Qantas, which had hedged a significant portion of its fuel in the second half of fiscal year 2022, was shielded from the worst of the spike. But here's where this entire story takes a big unexpected turn. In early 2025, Southwest Airlines, the carrier that defined fuel hedging for an entire generation, announced it was abandoning the strategy. After incurring $157 million in hedging premiums in 2024 alone, a 30% increase over the prior year, leadership concluded that hedging has not been beneficial to the company for the past 10 to 15 years. The airline that saved $3.5 billion through hedging walked away from hedging. The most successful fuel strategist in aviation history decided the game was no longer worth playing. The significance of Southwest's exit isn't about one airline's treasury policy, it's about what divergent fuel strategies reveal about the entire industry's competitive architecture. You see, fuel strategy doesn't just determine quarterly profits, it determines which routes get launched, which fares get offered, and which employees keep their jobs. When Continental cut thousands of positions in 2008 because it couldn't afford fuel, Southwest was hiring because it was hedged. When American saved $600 million by not hedging in 2014, that capital funded fleet renewal, while hedged competitors serviced derivative losses. The financial instruments are identical. Every airline has access to the same call options, the same collars, the same swap agreements, the same counterparties. Yet the outcomes diverge by billions of dollars. This is because hedging isn't really a financial decision, it's a philosophical one. Ryanair hedges aggressively because its ultra-low-cost model requires absolute fare predictability. Hedging buys certainty, and certainty is Ryanair's product. American doesn't hedge because its network and pricing power allow it to pass fuel costs to premium passengers. American's revenue mix tilts toward business travelers with inelastic demand. Delta owns a refinery because its Northeast hub concentration creates a specific supply chain vulnerability that financial derivatives can't address: the crack spread risk. The gap between crude oil and refined jet fuel was the exposure that nearly destroyed Delta's hedge book. Owning refining capability eliminates that basis risk entirely. Each strategy is internally logical. Each is also potentially catastrophic if market conditions shift in the wrong direction. Meanwhile, the industry faces a fuel challenge that makes conventional hedging look straightforward. Sustainable aviation fuel costs 3 to 5 times more than conventional jet fuel. Carriers like IAG are committing $3.5 billion to long-term take-or-pay SAF contracts, locking in supply at prices they hope will prove favorable. This is hedging by another name, but without the financial infrastructure that makes conventional hedging possible. As European mandates force increasing SAF blending requirements, the airlines with the most sophisticated fuel strategies will gain advantages that compound over decades. The hedging wars of the 2000s may prove to be merely a rehearsal for the SAF procurement wars of the 2030s. In 2008, Southwest Airlines hedged at $51 per barrel because it believed that managing in good times protects everyone in bad times. It was conviction, not calculation, a philosophical stance about what an airline owes its employees and passengers when markets turn hostile. 17 years later, that same airline abandoned the strategy because the math no longer worked. The premiums had grown too expensive, the markets had evolved, the insurance cost more than the risk it covered. Both decisions were right. That's the paradox. A single bad fuel bet can erase an entire airline's annual earnings. A single good one can fund a decade of growth. The fuel strategies are invisible. Their consequences are everywhere. The question isn't whether hedging works or doesn't work, it's whether the rest of the industry understands that the most consequential decision in aviation has nothing to do with airplanes, and everything to do with a bet most passengers will never know was placed. Hey, before you go, the YouTube algorithm thinks you're going to like this video next, so why not check it out?